A Quiet Place Day 1 is, drum roll please,
Okay.
keep the drum roll going,
You got it, man.
keep it going,
Okay.
keep it going.
How much longer do I have to do this?
Okay, stop. A Quiet Place Day 1 is pretty good. I enjoyed it a lot. 8 out of 10. More on that later. Let's talk about the A Quiet Place franchise. Quietly. I think they found me. When I saw the first A Quiet Place movie, I immediately thought, wouldn't it be neat if they made a movie about the day that the monsters showed up? And in A Quiet Place Part 2, they sort of showed that in a few flashback scenes, but that didn't completely satisfy my apocalypse hunger. But luckily for me, A Quiet Place Day 1 totally did. If you go into A Quiet Place Day 1 expecting a masterpiece that reinvents the thriller genre and tells a gripping tale akin to the first A Quiet Place film, you will be let down. But if you go into A Quiet Place Day 1 expecting a character-focused apocalypse movie about two good people helping each other out through the most unfortunate of circumstances, I think you'll be delighted. I certainly was. A Quiet Place Day 1 is by all means an apocalyptic buddy movie, and honestly, I think that's cool. But let's talk about these other A Quiet Place movies for a little bit. When I walked out of the theater in April of 2018, fresh off of seeing the first A Quiet Place film, I was blown away. And I think that was a pretty universal experience. It's a very good movie. This movie is just so well thought through, so emotional, so creative, so suspenseful. The sound design is really genius. And yeah, the first A Quiet Place movie made me cry, and continues to make me cry every night. The ending just hits hard, man. It really does. And I've always been fascinated by media that portrays the downfall of humanity, hence my obsession with the sci-fi genre. I just really like seeing different creative takes on the human race being put to the test against forces that not only we aren't prepared for, but forces that exploit our weaknesses as humans, ultimately resulting in the downfall of humanity. The first Quiet Place alludes to all that, but it doesn't show that. It implies how it happens, it implies where it happens, when it happens, but it leaves everything ambiguous and up to the imagination. Which is why that first Quiet Place movie feels so mysterious and atmospheric. You just don't really know what's going on most of the time, and it's just kind of terrifying the whole time. I gave A Quiet Place, the first one, a solid 9 out of 10. That movie is really good. It's not perfect by any means. Like, I don't think putting a baby in a dank, dark wooden box with an oxygen tank would keep it quiet, especially because it's like a newborn baby, but I don't know. I've never had a baby in the apocalypse, have you? And so after a lot of delays in May 2021, A Quiet Place Part 2 came along and said, suspense, spookiness, ambiguity, haha, you. A Quiet Place is an action franchise now. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. This movie has some very good, very intense scenes in it, particularly the day one scenes where it shows all the aliens landing, but as a whole this film is noticeably weaker than its predecessor, and it didn't help that it came out in the midst of a terrible world-altering pandemic, so as one of the only movies in theaters at the time, and given that life was really hard for a lot of people, I think A Quiet Place Part 2 was subject to a lot more scrutiny than it deserved. We were all a bunch of grumpy guys in 2021. Part 2 works on paper, I feel. The plot is fine. It seems like a natural narrative extension of the first film, but it just has some weird character inconsistencies and things that happen as a result of those inconsistencies that make me go, okay guys, that doesn't make sense, but whatever. Quiet Place Part 2 traded clever, suspenseful scenes and genuinely scary moments for world building and just straight up action sequences. This movie removed all ambiguity surrounding the monsters, and as a result, the monsters just weren't very scary in this movie. They're called Death Angels, by the way. I didn't know they were called Death Angels. That's cool, I guess. In Part 1, it's, a monster, run for your lives, kids. But in Part 2, it's, a monster, grab the boombox, son. Grab the shotgun, daughter. Let's blast this thing's head off. Which is cool in its own way, I guess, but it's just not very scary and it's far from thought-provoking. I will say the bear trap scene in this movie is pretty brutal. I like it. Shout out the bear trap scene in A Quiet Place Part 2. And I mean, that's the thing. A Quiet Place Part 2 has some really good performances and really great scenes. The sound design is once again very good, but it just doesn't add up as well as the first one does. I gave A Quiet Place Part 2 a 7 out of 10. It's a highly enjoyable flick, but it's flawed. Just like me. And so that brings us to 2024's A Quiet Place Day 1, which I enjoyed very much, as I mentioned earlier. This movie is extremely violent, easily the most violent film in the franchise thus far, which I found refreshing. I feel like franchises of this popularity have a tendency to get more sterile and stupid, taking less creative risks with every installment, but this movie was bloody, man. It was very, very violent. Me likey. The cast in this movie is stacked and every performance seems very earnest and genuine. The actors really gave it their all and I appreciate that. Alright guys, so for this shot, I'm gonna need you to be scared and also quiet. Can you do that?
Yeah, I guess.
Alright, sick.
Action.
I'll be real with you, I was not expecting to enjoy Joseph Quinn's performance in this film. From what I gathered in the trailers, this movie just seemed like a, look guys, we got the silly new guy from Stranger Things that everyone loved, remember him? But I was wrong. This man can act, and if Stranger Things Season 4 didn't prove that, then this movie most certainly did. And I loved his character every moment he was on screen. He was definitely the highlight of the movie for me. The rest of the cast in this movie was fantastic as well. Lupita Nyong'o was a wonderful main character. She carried the film upon her shoulders with ease, as she tends to do. Djimon Hounsou was awesome. Alex Wolff was awesome. I was like, oh look, it's the guy from the weird Jumanji movies. I remember him. You could really tell that everyone showed up to set and delivered the best performance they could. They were taking this one seriously. When you strip this movie down to its bare bones, it's just a story about two good people helping each other through unfortunate circumstances. Lupita Nyong'o's character is a bitter cancer patient on her deathbed, desperately trying to enjoy the last moments of her life, and through Joseph Quinn's character, she's able to see that there's still beauty and good in the world, despite the fact that the apocalypse is happening and she's about to die of cancer. Watching these two characters' friendship grow and develop throughout the film is really one of the more heartwarming experiences I've had in a cinema. They become so close so quickly in the movie that I thought they might be taking it in a romantic direction, but nothing inherently romantic ever happens, and in the end, they are just friends, which I think is for the best. I think if they did introduce a romance to the story between the two characters, it could have raised the emotional stakes, but it also could have totally ruined the whole vibe, and believe it or not, a hot guy and a hot girl of about the same age can be friends without ever developing a romance.
What? No way!
At the end of the day, I'm glad the movie kept their relationship to just a bromance, because bromance is beautiful. All in all, I thought A Quiet Place Day One was super cool, and it definitely fully scratched my I wonder what happened on the first day of the apocalypse in this franchise itch, which I appreciate. It is really violent, really suspenseful, and honestly a pretty cute movie. What are your thoughts on A Quiet Place? Which movies do you like? Which movies do you think are garbage? Have you seen the new A Quiet Place Day One? Do you think I'm a complete and total idiot? Tell me about it all in the comments below. I might read it, but keep it chill down there, okay?
He's watching us.
Have a great day.